Today we are going to be rendering the beeswax. So here's one that I have just finished, and I am going to walk you through the whole process about how we turn this brown sludgy stuff here that I've taken off of the frames into this beautiful golden color here. First thing that you need to do is to have a separate pot for melting your wax. So something that you're not going to be using again in the future for any cooking or anything, because it's going to have wax residue remaining on it no matter how good you try and get it clean. So you want to use a separate pot. You can use a saucepan like this one, or you can use something even bigger. Going to a thrift store, secondhand store, you can usually pick these up for a couple of bucks. So the next thing you need is a container. So I just use an old honey bucket here, and this is where the wax is going to go once it's filtered. So this used to be in there. So you're going to need a separate container that's going to act as your mold for the clean wax to go into. You're going to need some cheesecloth. You can use an old t-shirt, anything that's going to filter out the impurities of the wax. You're going to also need a little stir stick or something to poke the wax down with. So something again that's either disposable or you're not going to need to use for anything after that. It's going to have wax residue on it, and some rubber bands. To start with, you're going to want to put all of your wax that needs to be clean into a saucepan. Then you're going to need to add some clean water to it so that it covers a lot of the wax. There we go. So you're going to need to be careful when you're working with the wax, because wax is highly flammable, so you don't want to make a big candle and catch things on fire. So when you put your wax on your heat source, you're going to have it a medium to low. So you don't want to boil it, but you want to bring your water up to a high temperature but below boiling. So you're just going to leave it to sit there and keep an eye on it, because wax is flammable, and you're going to give it a little poke down there now and then, and make sure that your wax is submerged in the water as it starts to melt. So this is wax that I rendered last year. I didn't get very much, so I'm going to add this into the mix as well, so to render it again. So it's still got a fair bit of impurities in it, so I'm going to add that to the mix and do it again. So we use a lot of this wax for, we're going to try some candles this year, and some salves and lip balm, things like that. So we'd like to have it as clean as possible for that. A lot of times you're going to need to do your wax to render it down a few times in order to get it as clean and as pure as possible. So be prepared that you might need to do this a few times in order to get the result that you're looking for, depending on what you're using it for. So if you're going to use it to recoat your frames in wax in the springtime, then you don't need it as clean as you would if you were using it for candles or personal care products. So this block here was used, a lot of the wax that went into this were capping, so they were very, very white and clean. So we got a really nice color. So there's a few areas where there's some impurities in here, but overall this is the type of color that we're looking for, and it'll take a few go arounds to get that color from the product that we have in here. So I only have 3 beehives, and I keep every bit of wax. So any of that burr comb, I would just keep a little jar out in my kit and pop it into there. And you'd be surprised how much wax you can get off throughout the year. Just by keeping the little bits. You don't want to toss them on the ground and attract wax moths or anything like that. So you want to be able to just pop it in a jar and save it throughout the season, and you can turn it into some really nice products at the end of it's the end of the summer right now, or into the fall. You can take care of this at any time of the year. So while the wax is melting, you can get your bucket or container that you're going to use as a mold. You need to use something that has a shape that you can put cheesecloth or other type of your filter fabric on, so secure on top of there, because it's going to collect a fair bit of sludge. It's astounding actually how much impurities and sludgy stuff comes off of the wax. So you want to secure it with a couple of elastic bands over there to keep it nice and snug, and you want to give it a little bit of a if you can, push it down a little bit so you've got a nice spot there that's going to accumulate some of that sludgy stuff there, and not overflow. So it's starting to really melt now. You can see how mucky that is in there, and some those floating bees in there as well. So you want to make sure that it is completely melted, because you're going to be pouring it through that cheesecloth. So you want to capture as much of that melted wax as possible. So once it is completely melted and you don't have any chunks of wax floating in there anymore, you want to turn your heat off. When you pour it into your container with the strainer, make sure that you've got something down on the counter in case it splashes, because you might land up with a little bit of wax on your counter surface. So very carefully and slowly, you're going to want to pour this through the cloth. See how much sludge there is in it. And this is the water and the wax mixed together. There we go. So you're just going to leave that to go through to thoroughly drain all of the wax and water, and just leave the thick sludge on the top. So once this has drained all the way through, you can remove the elastics. This is still quite hot, so you want to be careful. And then you can pull your cheesecloth, or like I said, you could use an old t-shirt or anything else that's even paper toweling is good to filter, something that you can dispose of, because you won't be reusing it. It'll be penetrated with wax. So then you can squeeze out some of the additional wax out of the sludge stuff. Some people keep the sludge as well. You can do that. You can put it in a jar and use that, and use it for putting in swarm traps. So it still has all those good smells that swarms are attracted to. So you can keep that and pop that in a jar and keep it for that purpose. There we go. So I'm not going to keep mine for that. So I'm just going to dispose of it. So there we go, we've got this bucket, and what's going to happen is that's got the wax and the water in it. So the wax will rise to the surface as this cools, and the water will stay below it. So all that hot wax will rise up to the top, and we'll check back on it in a little bit. So when you go to check your wax, you can push on it to see if the water comes up. So just like this, you want to make sure that you're touching the sides of your bucket first to make sure that the water that is underneath the layer of wax has cooled, because you don't want to be pushing on the wax and get the water up and it be too hot and get scalded. So to get the wax out, you just start to push on it. The water's cold. You can push on one side of it and make sure it's free all the way around the edges, and then just pull your chunk of wax up. So you can see that it's, I'll rinse it off, but you still got some impurities in there and how dark the water is. You don't want to put this down your drain because there's wax particles in there, and you definitely don't want to be clogging up your drain, but you're going to want to also give this a little bit of a rinse off so it's nice and clean. Again, making personal care products or candles, I don't want to do this a second time to remove all of the residual impurities in the wax, just to make it 100% clean. But there you go, that's how you clean and render your wax.